I always thought that this would be stricken down anyway, but it's nice to see it come to fruition.
If you really get into the theatrics of it, and like you said, reading the concurrences and dissents, it can be very like camp, I want to say. To think
More,
somewhere in DC right now, Trump is preparing for his speech. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Washed Up episode 42. I'm Colin. This is Abby, and we're here to deliver the weekly news and comment on it so you don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do. It is currently February 24th, 2026.
and we are here with some just quick updates about some things. First of all, on Friday, February 20th, SCOTUS struck down the sweeping tariffs that Trump imposed with a 6-3 vote. Kavanaugh, Alito, and Thomas all being the dissenters. And we've been talking about this for a while, so
Ever
the main
since
opinion.
Liberation Day last year.
Like literally, yeah. So like the main opinion written by Roberts was said that the 1977 law that the executive could regulate commerce during national emergencies was not valid in this case because his sweeping tariffs did exceed this power.
Yeah, Liberation Day came early this year because SCOTUS ruled that, yeah, Trump does not have the authority to use IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economics Power Act, to impose these sweeping tariffs. That doesn't mean he's not going to try to find other backdoor ways of doing it. He's already actually implementing using Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. He's already implementing a across-the-board import tax of 10 to 15%. So he's basically already trying to reconstruct the IEEPA tariffs, even though they were just struck down. But yeah, as you said, it was 6-3. Were you surprised by the ways that the justices split on it?
No.
No.
I mean, when I saw the decision was 6-3, I would have guessed the three people who dissented. Kavanaugh for sure. Thomas for sure. Alito, maybe 50-50, but actually 75-25. But yeah, out of the justices that did dissent, I am not surprised that they three did.
So you actually read you read a majority of the actual ruling, which was around 175 pages. So was there anything in there that you pulled out that you're like, oh, this is good?
Yeah, I really like reading cases, but this one was so long. I didn't read the whole thing. I kind of just skimmed it. I usually try to read just concurrences and dissents because like that's how I was taught to do it when I was taking classes where I had to read cases. But notably, Kavanaugh's dissent was 63 pages long. His dissent was basically like, what about those who did have to pay the tariffs? Like, are we going to give them billions of dollars in refunds or what's going to
Seems like
happen there?
the answer is maybe yes, because some businesses are already suing to get like a tariff refund. Like I heard FedEx is now suing to, yeah, get money back from the federal
Hmm.
government for what they did have to pay, presumably in tariff costs. And I also saw a stat that these tariffs cost every American household $1,000 in 2025. So, are we going to be getting some of the money back? I don't know,
I know, should we sue too?
but the businesses are going to try. Yeah, how much did Washed Up pay because of these tariffs?
2000 at least. Um,
Yeah,
well,
so Trump was really attacking the justices who ruled against his tariffs, especially Amy Coney Barrett and Gorsuch. What did you think about
yeah, Gorsuch's concurrence was actually kind of funny to me because Gorsuch's concurrence calls ACB out actually and being like, what even is common sense? Like, I thought that was really funny because ACB's concurrence was all about like the major questions and being like, any person who is logical would know that this isn't explicitly said. And there was a quote where Gorsuch was like, none of this is even relevant here. And
it?
I just thought that it was like funny because I mean they agreed on the same things just for different reasonings, and that's why I always like reading like concurrences and dissents because even if you did vote majority on something, doesn't mean you agree with every single part of it. So there was that, and Gorsuch also said that the president relies entirely on power derived from Congress. And I also thought that was like a little like stab at Trump.
It's pretty clearly in the Constitution that that power is Congress's and not the president. That was kind of the whole reason why this IEEPA scheme kind of fell apart. And so again, he might try to find other ways to kind of get around that using this like temporary 150-day temporary tariff measure. But
Hmm.
now presumably it's Congress's responsibility to either step up and, implement the tariffs that he wants or to decide not to.
And I think that the most relevant part of this case is just that the courts, I mean, Justice Roberts wrote this too, but the courts being that they should be more skeptical of any executive having this reliance on emergencies, like up for interpretation to infringe on the powers of Congress. That was also the same argument that they had in the student loan forgiveness case as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. So yeah, so in addition to the justices kind of disagreeing amongst themselves, um, I thought it was really interesting how this is sort of like a balance of power issue, and we're seeing sort of a restoration of some of the power that had been ceded by Congress to the president, is now, going to have to go back to Congress or continue to be wrestled over by the different branches, which I think is a healthy thing compared to how it's
Yeah.
been going under Trump.
I mean,
Um,
we've talked about this before. Like we talked about it with congressional war powers as well. I mean, we had like a viral in our world, reel about that where people were really calling calling that out a
we
little
might be
bit.
talking about that later this episode, in fact, the
Yes,
Congress's
we
power to
will
declare
be.
war.
We will be. But I just think that's really interesting too. I think that the three branches holding each other accountable and, balancing each other's power out is a good thing. And I always thought that this would be stricken down anyway, but it's nice to see it come to fruition.
And so earlier, I had also referenced that Trump was coming after the justices with like personal attacks, and I saw he said that the justices should be disgraced and that their families should be ashamed of them, essentially. And again, I just think that that's so like theatrical and also predictable from Trump. Even though he literally appointed Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, he's
Hmm.
he's gonna like attack them the second that they oppose him. And we've seen that happen w with anyone who decides to go against him, whether they're friend or enemy. But every time it happens, it is. I think it reflects badly on the state of our politics.
Yeah, I am definitely very aware of the pattern that Trump has of turning on somebody the second that they disagree with them. So I'm glad that even the appointees of, or the people who are appointed by Trump decided that they would not be swayed by this power because technically they have the same amount of power that the executive should have as a branch of the judicial.
Do you think that some of that like tension between justices and Trump is going to carry over into tonight's State of the Union address?
Oh, most definitely. Um, Colin and I off camera were joking about ACB's eye roll that we also talked about a while ago,
Yeah,
and
last
how
year.
it was like a foreshadowing for what was to come in the way that she was going to be dealing with things because we all know that ACB is a very like rule of law type of justice. It's really interesting like what she has decided and like have you read her book? Was it you who I was talking about who has read her book?
Yeah, I have a copy of her book. I haven't read it though.
Yeah.
But she's pretty interesting. I mean, I would consider myself an ACB fan, as we talk about on this show quite a bit. I think someday she'll be Chief Justice, but that's probably a long way off.
Yeah, we'll see.
But just going back to the court really briefly, I think it's all very entertaining. It can be kind of
I
boring
love it.
to your average American, but I also think like if you really get into the theatrics of it and like you said, reading the concurrences and dissents, it can be very like camp, I want to say. Like even the fact that they wear like the robes and it's so serious and like the oral arguments and whatnot, there's a lot in there that it can be really fun and like you said, I love a good dissent, and reminds me of like when ACB wrote that dissent, or no, ACB wrote the majority opinion in the Trump v. Casa case, and like really went after Justice Jackson. And that some of the language they use is really punchy.
Well, there's also this certain type of language that they have to adhere to as well. I remember when I would have to like actually read cases and stuff because I had to, like for school. And our professor would always be like, okay, guys, I'm gonna start you guys off with the bulkiest cases because you just like need to get used to the way that they talk. But if you really just look at it and understand it, it's all just drama. Like it's all, again, like very much reactionary, like a lot of things that even politicians will talk about, but it's just like more, it's harder to understand because it's not like modern day language quote, but I agree with you. Like it's really interesting to read and to dissect. And if you don't understand it, then listening to people like us who can help you out.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to think, and this is sort of the point of ACB's book, if I'm not mistaken. Like you see the court and you see it's like so buttoned up and professional and like literally the highest court in the land, but then you realize that they're also just people at the same time who have their own subjective things that they're bringing to the table when they're making decisions, and they try to be as objective as humanly possible because that's literally their entire job. But even the justices bring their own kind of attributes and personalities to the table. So it's always fun, in my opinion, when that comes out in situations like their rulings, but then also State of the Union, where ACB gave an eye roll that was seen around the world. What will it be tonight, you think?
I am so excited for tonight, actually.
To think
More
somewhere in DC right now, Trump is preparing for his speech, and we're here
in two
talking.
hours. It's 7:04 right now. It's supposed to be at 9
He's
p.m.
probably rehearsing right now.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to talk about. What we wanted to talk about was our State of the Union predictions. Um, I was thinking about how Trump is very not script driven and how it must be such a nightmare for like his PR team and stuff like that to have to prepare him for something like this. And I kind of wanted to play a game with myself to see what he was saying, if he was saying stuff that was planned or not, and see if I can guess by the reactions of the people around him who surely know what he's talking about.
I wanted to make like a little bingo card of like things Trump might say that we can watch it and like check things off as we went. I didn't have time for that, but that would be really fun because I think, like you said, there's some stuff he'll definitely bring up, and then other stuff they like to like make it kind of a victory lap and be
Hmm.
like, and then we're gonna cure cancer, and then we're gonna go back to the moon, you know? That's
Well, did you
sometimes the vibe.
Yeah, well, did you see that Schumer is actually bringing in some Epstein victims so that it's like
Mm.
in his face that he has to address it? What do you think about that? Like, do you think he's going to address the Epstein files at all?
It's kind of giving Trump a taste of his own medicine because he brought some Bill Clinton accusers to the debate with Hillary Clinton back in 2016. So, in my view, like, I don't know that I'm a fan of it. I think it's a little bit kind of like feels a little bit dirty. Like, you're gonna maybe like do the victims really, really want to be there and like kind of experiencing the trauma of it in a very public way, or kind of like paraded around. I don't think that that's great. If they want to be there, then like sure they should be allowed to, but I think it's kind of a dirty tactic, although it's like I said, one that Trump has used previously against people he didn't like.
Definitely a taste of your own medicine vibe. Like, that's what I was thinking too. I agree with you. I think as long as they want to be there, I think they should be allowed to be there. But it's also hard to tell of how much pressure maybe was on them from whatever side to show up and force his hand, I guess.
I mean, it's kind of like they were there at the Bondi hearing in Congress like a week and a half ago. So,
Hmm.
if some of them really want to be like visible in that way, I think it makes sense. They're usually invited, I would assume, by like the members of Congress as like their, invited guests. And as far as the State of the Union, it makes less sense to me that they would go to that. Maybe they're there to highlight the injustice of the DOJ and how it has handled Epstein in the files, but I don't understand why they would do it specifically because Trump is speaking.
Hmm. Do you think that Trump is going to talk about the DOJ?
I really don't. I don't think he's gonna mention Epstein at all. I think he's just wants to move on from it all, and I think that's kind of been his strategy of it. Is Pam Bundy's been out there kind of rolling in the mud with the members of Congress over it, but he's kind of stayed above it all in a way and just kind of kept this tone of like it's not my problem, and that's actually fared decently well for him to just kind of keep skating by.
Yeah, I was looking at the polls and stuff about Trump before going into the State of the Union, and I saw a couple polls. Right now, I've written down an NPR poll of 6 out of 10 Americans believe that the country is worse now than a year ago, where the majority think that that the State of the Union is not strong. What polls have you been seeing, if any?
Yeah, pretty much same. I mean, he's way underwater with the independents, which, back when he ran in 24, he was kind of able to put together this interesting coalition and he brought a lot of independents on board such that he
Hmm.
won every swing state. But he's lost a lot of favor with the independents, I think because of they don't think the economy is getting better fast enough, or at all. They disagree with him on tariffs. Actually, 60% of people disagree with him on tariffs. 85% do not want war with Iran. So, if he does in fact go to war with Iran, then he'd be pissing a lot of people off with that. And then the Epstein files. I think a lot of people wanted transparency, and like we were just saying, he was not necessarily the main perpetrator of the lack of transparency. Like I would more blame the DOJ and FBI personally, but he is the top dog, so it does kind of fall on him also.
Hmm. I was thinking about everything he's like done in the past year, and again, like everything you just named, how much he has upset so many different parties, especially the ones that, like you said, rallied him over in the swing states. Affordability being a huge one, especially for Gen Z. Um, I am hoping that he has some I'm hoping that he addresses some affordability concerns, but I think it could be up in the air. I think he will, but I don't think that he will be very factual about it.
Yeah, affordability has become a real like rallying cry for Gen Z against Republicans, and I think Mamdani kind of rode that into office as New York's mayor. But yeah, that being said, I don't. It's an open question whether or not Trump will bring up affordability, like with the Epstein files, or if he'll just kind of bypass it completely, and it'll just be like the elephant in the room that is not being brought up.
Yeah, well, I can imagine him talking about the economy and being like, the economy's booming, like it's the best it's ever been when it's not true. Um,
Yeah, I mean, he's so like good at just spinning. Well, he's not actually that good at it, but he's persistent about spinning things. And he gave that speech back in December about how like the economy is doing better than it's ever been, and like there is no affordability issue. And I feel like he lost popularity since December. So just
Yeah, and
my opinion.
even him addressing these polls of people disagreeing with him slash not liking him anymore or switching up on him, whatever. He has been looking at it being like, that's fake news. Like, I don't know what the legacy media is telling you, stuff like that, which is very Trump court.
So besides the Epstein accusers, who else do you think he'll bring out? Like, I think this could kind of be like, Coachella, where they bring out like surprise guests and whatnot. Who do you think it's gonna be at the State of the Union?
I'm thinking maybe Nicki Minaj will be there. She's been his number one fans, and he's been um having her around and in different crowds. We were talking about Erica Kirk being there. Yeah, those are two that I think will be there for sure. Who
I
else?
had also guessed Erica Kirk might be there just because she's been so like public since her husband was killed, and I want to go back and correct something that I said in
Oh yeah.
the last time we mentioned Erica Kirk was when she was speaking at Charlie Kirk's service in Arizona, and I had made a comparison between her and Jackie Kennedy, which I would like to retract because I think that. say what you will about the parallels. There might actually be parallels because I think Jackie and Erica both kind of were constructing the narrative about their husband in the wake of the assassination in a pretty kind of powerful way. But I feel like Erica has been way more public facing than Jackie was. Jackie kind of like faded into the background, and I don't necessarily agree with everything Erica has been up to. I
I
feel like
definitely don't agree with a lot that she's been up to. She seems to be almost like riding this wave of grief for this attention that calls away from a lot of what she should be talking about, I think.
yeah, I mean, it seems like the internet has kind of turned against her. Obviously, Candace Owens turned against her some time ago, and not in a way that I think is conducive or helpful, but it's just like a weird situation because I think her stepping into being the CEO like immediately after Charlie Kirk was killed was probably just a lot, and like you said, the way that grief kind of like changes your mentality and perspective on things. I think you need time and space to heal, and I feel like she just hopped like straight into the public eye and uh, hasn't been received all that well.
Yeah, I don't want to ever talk about somebody else's grief journey and say they're wrong in something, but this has definitely been an interesting one to see from an outside perspective.
So yeah, she might be there. I guess the U.S. hockey team that just won Olympic gold is gonna be there. They beat Canada in like kind of last minute win. Did you see any of that?
Their win, yes, I did. I'm a very big hockey fan. So I was actually keeping up with both the women's and the men's hockey team, and the US won in both in overtime. But yeah, some people are up in the air about the hockey team and, for example, like Patel drinking with them. I've been seeing like memes and tweets about that and people calling him out, which I don't know. I pro not the best look for him at all.
Right. I mean, Kash Patel's kind of been under fire recently because of his handling of the Epstein Files, and he's like, you know what'll fix this?
I'm gonna go drink with America's heroes right now.
Yeah, I just think Patel's been a disaster as FBI director. He's had all these, I don't want to call them scandals, but like people have also said that he's using his plane privileges and going to see his girlfriend, who's like a country singer, going to see her concerts, and it's like, is this really the priority right now? Like, are you serious? And that's how I feel about the Olympic stuff too.
Yeah, if we paid for him to go to the Olympics, I think that we should get that money back as well, on top of whatever money we get from SCOTUS striking down these tariff deals. Just, I want it all back.
Well, yeah, I mean, so this has just been a crazy month of like again, the Olympics, the tariff ruling, State of the Union, and all of these to me, like they get very politicized in a pretty exhausting way, I have to say. And I fully expect the State of the Union tonight will be the exact same way, where the guests that they're bringing, are very politicized, and it sort of becomes like a um, the guests that they bring can become like in and of itself like a weapon against the other side, and I just find it all again so theatrical, very camp, very like over the top and exhausting.
Yeah, even the responses to the State of the Union as well. Like people were talking about the different types of people who are going to respond with, Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger will give the official Democrat response. And I was thinking about like what she could possibly, I mean, there's probably going to be a lot, but what she would mainly tear apart in Trump's State of the Union. And she ran her campaign a lot on affordability. So I feel like she might take a main point with that, even if it's not touched on. Like, I think she could have a good response to that.
Yeah, I think so. Like we said, that's sort of an angle that has been productive for the Democrats. My opinion about Spanberger, definitely represents sort of that insider, like intelligence background that I'm very reluctant about whenever I see it in our politicians.
Hmm
But to each their own.
Um, do we think that Trump's going to talk about immigration at all?
Oh, he must. Now
Right? Yeah, he must.
I mean, that's sort of the big story from January, and it did resolve with they drew back ICE agents out of Minneapolis, and also Trisha McLaughlin is out at DHS, and she was the spokesperson who Abby and I referenced several times. I think I called her Kristi Noem's hench person at one point. So sorry to see Trisha McLaughlin leave that role as the spokesperson, but hope the
God.
door doesn't hit her on the way out.
That headline that you sent me, I don't remember who it was from, but it was like boring Barbie's mouthpiece is out or something like that. So funny.
Yeah, in my mind, there's no world where I should know the spokesperson of the DHS by name, and that tells you a lot about how often she was having to make PR statements on behalf of DHS defending the things that they were doing, and not necessarily a good thing.
What a miserable job, honestly.
Yeah. Apparently Trisha McLaughlin was gonna leave in December, but she stayed on for the extra month. But like, God, what a month to stay on.
What? Okay, that's actually so funny and unfortunate for her, or fortunate, depending on like what she likes, because a job like this can only be masochism. Like, but in the past month, like so much has happened with her position and Christine Ohm in the DHS. So, I'm surprised she didn't leave earlier when she could have.
I mean, we've talked before about how PR in and of itself is kind of a miserable job because you're being paid to lie, and that's kind of a gross way to go about life. But then to lie on behalf of like the most controversial agency in the government right now,
Right.
in the midst of like two or three of the biggest scandals that they've had, like, good luck.
No, seriously, I wouldn't trust anyone who would be down to take that job.
So apparently there was a person who testified last week about he was a former like his job was training the ICE agents, the new ones, and he worked at some facility in Georgia where they'd like train them up to go out in the field. And he testified before Congress last week that they had really like cut back on a lot of the training that those agents were getting, and they were kind of letting people go out in the field despite like the strategic failure of not having trained them properly. So.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just putting that out there too. That we had mentioned before the fact that they had brought on so many agents all at one time.
Hmm.
We had suspected that there might be some gaps in the training they were receiving, and then that was supported by this testimony last week.
Yeah, that was like our major, I mean, there's a lot to gripe on, but that was a huge major gripe where we were like, there's no way that these people are qualified enough to do this at all at the levels that they're doing. It was very much like a quantity type of thing to almost scare the masses, which I don't respect at all.
So, I mean, Trump hopefully will address some of that at the State of the Union, but
Ah,
there's so much else that he can kind of just pick and choose what he wants to talk about and make it again like a victory lap for him and spin it as much as he wants and with no consequence.
yeah, there's no scarcity in the topics that he can choose from.
So, as I said, my prediction for State of the Union, it's going to be basically watching a ton of toxic crap spilled out, and I'm not talking about the infrastructure failure that's happening in DC right now with the Potomac River, which, if anyone has been following, is another big story right now where there's a broken pipe that's spewing sewage into the water.
Yeah, fun to be people living in DC right now, honestly.
Okay, so I think our last story of this episode, we want to talk about Iran. Do you think Trump's going to bring that up at State of the Union?
No. I I don't think he is. If anything, the closest that we'll come to is maybe talking about all the wars that he stopped or being such a big peacemaker. Oh, maybe he'll bring up his peace prize that he got, his Nobel Peace
True.
Prize he got. But I can't see him talking about what he specifically has planned, especially when so many people are calling for those plans to be revealed, especially on like the Democrat side being like, what's happening? Can you tell us? the dealio with Iran right now, and he has not done so,
Yeah, he's been very hush hush about it.
which is scary to me.
For our audience, there's been a buildup of military around bases in the Middle East and Europe where the U.S. is sending a ton of forces out there with airplanes, the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carriers going out there. And we saw this happen back in June with the 12 Days War, where there was this kind of buildup of military presence, like the U.S. might engage with Iran. They've shifted the justification several times for why this buildup is happening. You know, they've been saying since the 90s, especially Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying that this is because Iran can't have a nuclear bomb and they're enriching and they're going to have a bomb by the end of next month or next week or whatever. And they keep shifting those goalposts and saying, like, we need to intervene before they get the nuclear bomb, or they enrich uranium past a certain point where they can have a bomb, basically. But we've also seen them since January saying we need to intervene in Iran because they're cracking down on their own citizens and it's like a human rights issue. So to me, it's like, which is it? Is it because they can't enrich or we can't allow, there should be zero enrichment and they won't agree to that? Is it because of ballistic missiles, which is another thing that the US has cited, or is it because of the humanitarian issue? Because we can't like
Humani
pick a lane, you know?
hmm And the humanitarian issue, especially since we heard what was happening, or especially since we heard um, Davos, I'm thinking about anything the that our country is doing in terms of humanitarian wise isn't always the main reason. I'm thinking to myself that there could be reasons that overlap one another, sure, but there's no I like have a hard time believing that the main issue or the main reason why they're doing something is a humanitarian crisis when there are definitely other things that they could be focusing on as well, even internationally, that they hadn't before, in terms of humanitarian issues or like, saving people or, a country coming in and swooping and being the
The
hero.
liberators.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's something that's cited a lot by people like Nikki Haley or Lindsey Graham. They say like we want to liberate the people of Iran from their oppressive government, which is, a noble sentiment on its face, but when you look at sort of the repercussions that could come out of this and the American lives and money that could be lost in the process of engaging in a war, which the military experts are saying could last for weeks to months because of just the strategic challenges of Iran and it's not like other Middle Eastern countries where we did have prolonged conflicts. Iran specifically is basically a mountain fortress where they can just go underground and in their bunkers and kind of wait us out. So to have a prolonged military engagement with Iran is just kind of strategically dumb. Not to, which is to say nothing of again the shifting reasons why they're claiming we would even go into Iran. So it doesn't make sense on its face. A lot of people say that the US is doing it on the behest of Israel, who has been wanting to expand slash eliminate its competition in the region for a while now. And no coincidence that Netanyahu was at the White House for the seventh time in a year a couple weeks back.
And on top of all of that, no one wants this war, so listen to the people.
Right, 85% of Americans say no to this engagement. Yeah, I think that's all for me though.
Yeah, that was a nice little update. Next time we'll talk about what actually went down at the State of the Union.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of a react. I'm sure there'll be some great memes that come out of it. There always are. Um, like, remember we mentioned before how Pelosi like ripped up Trump's speech and that became a meme. So
Hmm.
we'll see what it is this time.
Okay,
Washed
washed up
up
out.
out.